actually dislike smoking quite intensely. I bullied my wife into giving up smoking in a lot of early matrimonial friction, and I used to accuse her of needing a crutch and lacking self-esteem and tra-la-la, and so that's my personal view. So many people wonder why, and you know, I don't think he'll mind me naming him, the eminent economist Davy Root said to me, why do I deal with such unimportant issues? Why don't I stick to the important issues? And I asked him, what is more important than personal dignity, happiness and freedom? And the tobacco issue is the thin edge of a very substantial wedge. The thick end of the wedge is actually the elimination of all personal lifestyle control. And that's what I'm going to try and persuade you is the case. And also the elimination of many rights, intellectual property rights, the right to trade and do business, and most importantly, the one that concerns me most is consumer rights. The right of consumers to, for example, get information about products they are allowed to buy. The ban on advertising and marketing and the proposed ban on display at point of sale is essentially, to me, an extraordinary violation of the right of consumers to know what products are available, what new brands there are. Think of the transformational implications of this. That if you ban marketing and advertising, obviously what you do is you guarantee that all existing products will be the only products. No new products can enter the market, no new businesses can emerge. And it's not just tobacco. We're talking about tobacco now. And by the way, I also want to make the legal point, I've got two eminent lawyers in front of me here, that nobody ever controls tobacco. There is no such thing as tobacco control. Have you ever seen an inspector running down the road after a cigarette, trying to catch it because it's misbehaving? You don't have such a thing as exchange control. You've never seen a Reserve Bank official trying to control a dollar that's got out of control. No. All control is people control. There is only one kind of control. It is the control of human beings. And we tend to be slid into accepting controls of people because they are called controls of maize or controls of transport or controls of tobacco or alcohol or whatever. If you always understand that every control is a control of people, all control is people control. And that's the issue most importantly about the proposed tobacco plain packaging law, is that a control of the people who want to consume tobacco. Now, just as there are people who want to gamble, which I don't understand, and drink alcohol, which I don't do, and want to, you know, I don't know, visit massage parlors or whatever, all sorts of things people do. I don't, for example, wear bras. I just don't mind other people doing it, you see. So the fact that I don't do something doesn't mean other people shouldn't. They should be free to do what I choose not to do. And it's that personal. I want to make it personal. I want to understand that when you want to control tobacco or alcohol or sugar or salt or complementary medicine or alternative medicine or faith healing or traditional healing, all of which are currently being targeted by our department, what I call the Department for Health and Against Freedom. They are all in its sights. They are all under discussion for regulation, prohibition, taxation, like the new sugar tax. And this is just one further slice of the salami. Each little slice gets allowed and condoned. It started with minor restrictions on tobacco. Then it went into separate smoking areas in restaurants, and each little step seemed on its own not to be too serious. But when you slice away little slices, eventually the tobacco is, the salami or the polony is finished. And that is what's happening, is an endless slicing of thin slithers till eventually it's all gone. And I see Fanny in the audience who is familiar with how this applies to the liquor industry. The slithering, slicing away of the rights, not of suppliers like she is, but of consumers to buy and consume what they want. It's called sin tax when sugar or salt or liquor or tobacco is taxed, which is a misnomer for two reasons. One is It is not a tax on sin. It is a tax on fun. It should be called a fun tax, or a happiness tax, or a pleasure tax. What's more serious is when the Department of Trade, when the Department of Finance budgets for the sugar tax, for example, increases in tobacco and liquor tax, it budgets on the assumption of no significant reduction in consumption. Now that's important. It predicts revenue on the assumption that the same quantity will be sold, and it will just simply shave off the tax on top of it. Now consider where that money comes from, especially from low-income earners, Fanny's customers. They have to divert the money from something healthy, something else, vegetables, education, clothing, housing, something else, into paying the so-called sin tax. In other words, it's a health tax. It's a tax on healthy things, not a tax on unhealthy things. Healthy activities are being taxed. Now, I want to run through the basics of the issue of the plain packaging regulation, which is the theme of this year's World Health Organization No Tobacco Day. They have annual themes. This year's theme is plain packaging, and they are on a massive drive worldwide to promote plain packaging. Speaking of that, you will hear this stale refrain that the people who oppose the regulation are big tobacco. Big tobacco's budget for marketing, advertising and campaigning is a tiny fraction of what the World Health Organization and the health departments around the world spend on the propaganda against it. For example, in South Africa, you might all be familiar with Yusuf Saluji, who runs the Council Against Smoking. He is funded by you, by your taxes. He is a paid propagandist for the Department of Health. Billions of dollars are spent campaigning against these freedoms, for controls. And what big tobacco brings to the party is negligible. And if people think I might be a front for big tobacco, I'd love to be. But if I were, it would be a very small amount of money compared to the people who are front for health fundamentalists and freedom denialists, the people on the other side. So what are the basics then? Firstly, it is no longer about protecting non-smokers. We hear over and over again. This morning there was somebody who called into Radio 702 and said Leon Louw talks nonsense when he says that they shouldn't introduce plain packaging. You have to, because you have to protect children and passive smokers and non-smokers from the smoke of other people. That was covered long ago. When there were separate smoking areas, smokers had to be in ventilated areas. There was a full 100% legal protection of non-smokers from smokers. And what's more, it wasn't even necessary to make a law. It was the law before anyway. You may not pollute my air with anything. It's a simple common law that you may not violate my rights. You can't pollute the river that runs through my house. You can't pollute my air. You can't bombard me with unpleasant noise, etc., etc. So there has always been 100% protection of the rights of people like me, non-smokers who dislike other people's tobacco smoke. So, but nonetheless, that argument has now fallen away because it is now a frontal assault on what people do in their own places. Prohibition of smoking in the workplace. If you are a sole person, you make furniture, like someone who often visits us here, is not here today. He's a furniture maker in his own workshop by himself. He's the only person there. The law says he may not smoke at his workplace. The law says I may not smoke in my office in the corner, which has big sliding doors and opening windows, and I can seal off completely from everyone else. But I have to walk 10 meters from an entrance to smoke. By the way, it doesn't say from an exit. I think that was a bit of bad legal drafting, but that's aside. You have now 10 meters, you know, Fanny, that in the townships, as we call them, you cannot get 10 meters from an exit. It's not legal, it's not physically possible. In other words, basically the proposed law prohibits all liquor consumption in this case, I mean all smoking, sorry, in what we call the townships, locations and settlements. You would have to drive out of Soweto, rent a taxi, go somewhere into the veld somewhere to lawfully have a puff. That is how nutty it is. And I'm not going to be polite. The law is, in my view, nuts, crazy, mad. It's madness that actually has to be stopped. And it's got this veneer of respectability because it comes from the World Health Organization. This is presumed somehow to paper over the madness of it. So it is now about interfering with the rights of people who do not violate anyone else's rights and where nobody else is subjected to their tobacco. Just consider this. I was in the SABC this morning where our Minister of Health, Motsoaledi, and his propagandist, Saluji, and I don't mind being published saying that. If I'm accused of defamation, I would like to go to court on the matter. His propagandist, Saluji, was there. In that building, there are a few thousand people working. The law requires them to leave the building to smoke. In fact, they don't. There's a smoking area, glassed off, a few of them, where people sit and smoke ventilated. If the law is enforced, they will all have to walk out onto the pavement, where non-smokers will have to walk through clouds of smoke being produced by literally hundreds of smokers who take off work, go down the broken elevators, and go out onto the sidewalks to smoke. This is imposing smoking on non-smokers. This is not protecting anyone from them. The law has now started shamelessly invading the rights of what people do by themselves when they do no harm to anyone else. And it is now about protecting you from your own stupidity. This is how it is couched. And this is why we are having, for example, plain packaging, to educate you about how bad it is. And we'll see how they go about doing that. It is now patronizing, insulting, demeaning, and draconian. Now, we're going to show how draconian it is by applying the same logic to other things considered unhealthy. It violates Section 1, a founding principle of the Constitution, the right to dignity. Now, this is, strangely enough, the number 1 clause in our Constitution. It's surprising how few people have actually bothered to read it. It says some very important things. One is the rule of law, but another is everyone has the right to dignity. Now, how does a smoker who is forced to go out in the rain, the snow, and this heat, to stand outside a building and smoke, treated like a leper who has to be kept away from their colleagues, even from other colleagues who smoke? The proposed law, by the way, just to show you how nuts it gets, says that you may not smoke within 50 meters of someone on a beach near a bathing area. Now, let's ask the lawyers what near a bathing area means on a beach. You know, do you bathe on the beach or in the sea, whatever? Anyway, near a bathing area. 50 meters. So a husband and wife who both smoke have to stand 50 meters apart when they smoke. This is, who thought of it? You know, you really, I want to go and I have coffee. I don't have beers, so I want to have coffee with whoever wrote this extraordinarily stupid provision. And, you know, what were they thinking? And it goes through, by the way, the ministerial committees and all sorts of high-level, supposedly qualified people look at these measures and pass them because they are so profoundly politically correct. The logical extension of all, it's logical that it should be extended to all unsafe and unhealthy products, and that is what I want to show. It has got to go there. You cannot assume it will stop with tobacco because nothing else stopped with tobacco, like the prohibition of marketing, display and advertising and health warnings. The real objective is total prohibition, which, like the prohibition of liquor in free societies, was delusional and megalomaniacal. Now, in case you don't realize that, it was repeated this morning quite unambiguously, quite bluntly, by our Minister of Health and Against Freedom, Aaron Motsoaledi, on SABC. You can all go and look at the podcast. He said that the objective is total prohibition, that there is going to be a tobacco-free planet. That is what they intend to achieve. Can you imagine the law breaking? Can you imagine the black market, the crime syndicates, the mafiosi, the implications of trying to ban tobacco, and then next, of course, will have to be liquor. And then after that will have to be things like sugar and fast foods. We'll get on to those. These are the health warnings that are similar to the ones that are planned now, that have been announced, for South African cigarette packets, applied to other products. Red wine, you know, this will be on your table. No branding. That's what's called plain packaging. And this is called plain, by the way. This is plain. I don't know if do you consider this plain? I mean, plain would be sort of bland white with just a label on. But no, it is not plain. It's ghastly. It's maximally obnoxious. It is as obnoxious as anybody can think of. It is their most obnoxious fantasy, which they want to put in everybody's pocket and on everybody's shop shelf. This is called plain, and it's this is, you know, red wine. That's a diseased liver. This is bowel cancer. In case you haven't examined yourself there recently, that's what it looks like. And this is cold drinks, CocaCola, which now have a sugar tax supposedly to discourage people from drinking. Under here, I'm not allowed to show you what tin is actually under there, but nonetheless it will in future look like all cold drinks, all wine. This is the logic applied to tobacco. No differentiation between products and no information about where your product is available. So if you're a wine drinker, what is now proposed, it is before us, is a prohibition on information about where your favorite brand of wine is available and what promotions there are and what wine is stocked, and of course effectively a prohibition on the introduction of any new wine at all, especially by an emergent South African wanting to have a black economic empowerment winery, for example. This is effectively prohibited. So the status quo is entrenched so that you will not be allowed to introduce a new product. And that is one of the reasons why, by the way, in the liquor industry, I don't know if you noticed recently, the feverish introduction of new flavored beers and all sorts of wines and so on, just to get everything on the market they can, so that when prohibition of marketing and advertising and then eventually plain packaging comes, at least the products are already to some extent there. But it is the end of innovation. It is the end of competition. It is the end of consumer rights. The consumer right to information, the consumer right to attractive products, the consumer right to accessible products, to products that are displayed in accessible ways on shelves, and consumers will now be forced to carry around with them maximally obnoxious looking products. Well, of course, you don't have to be very clever to predict what entrepreneurs will do and are doing, is they just create little pouches with the branding on that you can go and buy and put your packet in so it still looks pretty and still says Camel or whatever, Marlboro or something. And you'll have your, you know, Nederburg selected Cabernet. You'll just put it in a little sleeve that makes the bottle look the way you want it to. And chocolate. This is how your chocolate will look in future. This is what is this one? Oh yes, disease, bowel cancer. Yeah, that's what it gives you. And obesity is one of the big ones. This is the sort of thing that you could expect to see compulsory images that will have to be outside of fast food outlets. Every McDonald's and Wimpy will have to have pictures like this as you walk in. But they are quite mild. This literally, I'm not exaggerating, this is from an anti-McDonald's campaign. This was used, showing this is what McDonald's did to him, and that's what staying away from McDonald's did. This is a genuine McDonald's attack. So instead of McDonald's looking like this is what McDonald's will look like when plain packaging and restrictions on marketing and at making things attractive are introduced. This is a future McDonald's. Look forward to, you know, and I'm not picking on my Wimpy and I don't know who these fast foods people. I don't do these things. You see, I'm like a health nut, but there we are. And this is the sort of image you should expect to see on chocolate bars, on chip packets, on cookies, cake, biscuits, you know, even on loaves of white refined bread are going to have pictures like this, you know, watch out Don't do this to your family. And instead of McDonald's logos looking like this, they will in future have to look like this. This is a future McDonald's logo based on the logic of plain packaging of cigarette products. And this is, you know, the end of what I have to say, and I really mean it. It is the end. It is the end of any semblance, any pretense of personal rights and lifestyle control over your life if we allow this to happen. And people who don't smoke, who stood by when anti-smoking measures were introduced, and even rejoiced and welcomed and celebrated them, like I'm sure some people in this room, just bearing in mind that your turn is coming. The thing you like is going to be, is in the pipeline. It is scheduled. It is under discussion, and there are policy and draft discussion documents for this in the Department of Health as we speak. And we've heard about some of them have been published. Prohibition of liquor marketing and advertising and display. And the next thing, of course, is plain packaging. And then it's going to be, oh, and there's a proposal for age restrictions on fast foods. So kids on their way home from playing rugby after school will not be able to stop and have a McDonald's and Coke. And at present, if they do, they have to pay more. Now, that business of taxing cold drinks, by the way, just bearing in mind that it is a regressive tax. It's a restrictive tax. It's a discriminatory tax against one source of sugar. All the other sources of sugar are left out for the time being. Everything from chocolate bars to donuts to salad dressing, all of these things include sugar. In Denmark and Finland, they even have a fat tax, fatty meat. So your braai meat in future will be taxed. But it's regressive because the vast majority of cold drinks and sugared products, all sugared products, and salted products are bought by low and middle income people. And for each one of them, the extra cost is a significant cost. For the people in this room, it's probably irrelevant and inconsequential, makes no difference to you. And even in this room, the people who smoke and drink probably won't really mind that much once you'll just put your wine in a pretty crystal glass decanter and you'll put your cigarettes in a little silver or gold pouch. Some people already do it anyway. The people who matter are the poor, the masses, the customers of the liquor traders we see and the spaza owners we see in this room. They are the people who are victimized here. They are the people for whom this is serious money, for whom this is a serious violation of their right to dignity, of their right to access to information, of their right to products. Now, does this mean we don't care? No. On the contrary, it is we who do care. We want unambiguous, unqualified, vigorous protection of people from the violation of their rights by others, by the imposition on them of drunk driving, drunk abusive behavior in pubs and in homes, of passive smoking, tobacco, and so on. We want the same unambiguous freedom for the people who want to smoke and drink and eat fatty food and eat salted chips and eat refined bread and do all of the other supposedly unhealthy things, become obese, watch reality TV. There's a proposal, by the way, in the United States. No, I'm serious. There are serious proposals to impose restrictions and taxes on reality TV because they cause people to be sedentary. They sit and look instead of exercising. And that is not a joke. That is where it's going. We need to really get this clear in our heads. I'm now going to hand over to someone who will probably present you with a much more sober and restrained and scholarly analysis of the implications of branding and property rights, intellectual rights, which are also under attack here. So I've spoken mainly about the rights of consumers to be treated properly. And I haven't addressed the rights of producers and suppliers to have a right to market their products, compete, innovate, brand. Now, do you want to say a few things? Yeah, thank you. You don't have to speak in front of my pretty pictures.
You don't want to leave the mic?
Maybe I should.
Thanks, Leon. Is this on? My name is Andrew Papadopoulos. I'm from Kish IP Attorneys. I'm a trademark and copyright attorney. I didn't prepare anything for today. Leon sprung this on me, but I can give a few comments on it from my perspective as a trademark attorney. You know, I'm not too concerned what the product is: tobacco, alcohol, soda. My point of view is a trademark point of view. That's my my business and what I am passionate about. You know, trademarks have an important role to play. They tell consumers what the products are, what the quality is, and so on. We all know that. But on the flip side, regulation is important. You know, as you said, Leon, I don't want someone driving drunk. That's something that we all want. But where's the line between regulation and over-regulation? So I think what we need to look at here is what are the objectives of the health minister to implement this. He wants to reduce the incidence of smoking, for instance, if we take the tobacco. Does he have evidence to show that this will reduce the incidence of smoking? You know, the first reports that have come out of Australia by KPMG is that it's not reducing the incidence of smoking. So where is their basis for introducing this? You know, the World Health Organization requires its members to implement certain provisions, and plain packaging isn't one of those requirements. It's a suggestion. It's a non-binding guideline. So when you take away a party's or a product's trademark or logo, you withholding information to your consumer. Your consumer is less informed, which is the problem here, which can lead to counterfeiting. Obviously, it's a lot easier for a counterfeiter to copy a box like this as opposed to a box with a hologram on it or any of the other symbols that the current brand owners put in to stop counterfeiting. And then what are the consequences of counterfeiting? That means those products aren't regulated at all. That means what is in the product itself? Is it rat droppings from the bottom of the factory that they've swept up and put into these products? So the consequence is that you're going to have an increase in counterfeiting, and it's going to be more dangerous. You're going to have a product on the market which is more dangerous, that a consumer can't identify that it's a counterfeit product. So that's one of the unintended consequences of plain packaging. Foreign investment, you know, when foreign investors come in, they look for protection of their IP. If they can't protect their IP, what are they protecting? So it deters foreign investment. Local tax revenues. If there is an upsurge in counterfeiting, which there has been in Australia, which was the first country to introduce plain packaging for cigarettes, they've seen an upsurge in counterfeiting. There is no tax on counterfeit products, obviously, and therefore the revenue services get less money there. So all these points should be taken into account, and we should be asking the questions of what is government's objectives and where's the evidence to show that. And then once they've shown that they have that plain packaging will help society as much as they can show that, then we go into the regulatory impact assessment on what do these regulations do. Is it 10 meters from a door? Is that going to actually help the majority of South Africans? We can't just take Australians' blueprint and put it on South Africa. South Africa is a completely different society to Australia. Australia doesn't have the informal sector like we do. So a rule to say you have to smoke 10 meters from an exit won't apply in the informal sector. which means they're not going to take a taxi to a field. What they're going to do is they're going to smoke. So your regulations that you want to bring in to help society isn't going to help society. That's it from my side.
Okay.
Thanks, Neil.
Jane, I suppose the two of us will take questions and comments and debate. Jane, do you want to lead the discussion?
Well, what do you think? Give your name, please.
Thanks, everyone, for the presentation. Mine is just two questions.